I would like to call the Council of the Committee of the Whole of June 24th, 2024 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Brunet, Councillor and Chair of the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given, and if assistance is required, please see our Deputy Clerk. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, please ensure your cell phone is either silent or turned off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Committee of the Whole meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available on all our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. Roll call. Members of committee are in attendance either in person and remotely, and Councillor Rinjema is absent and sends her regrets. We have staff in attendance this evening in person and remotely. In addition, we have Beverly Hendry, past president of the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, CAMA, and KPMG representatives in attendance this evening. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, do members have any amendments to the order of the agenda? Statutory public meeting, we have none. So we are now at the consent agenda section of the agenda, and we will now consider the consent agenda inclusive of the Joint Fire Services Advisory Committee minutes of September the 21st, 2023. Would any member of committee like to remove any item from the consent agenda to discuss? Councillor Timmers, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Brunet. I'd like to pull the Joint Fire Services Advisory Committee minutes. I have a couple of questions.
Okay. Deputy Clerk, we okay to go to that now, or how would you like to deal with that?
Given that it's the only item on the consent agenda, I think we're okay to ask a question.
Okay. Councillor Timmers, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to staff, I'm guessing. I'm just curious about these minutes. You know, these minutes are from 9 months ago, and there aren't any December minutes from December's meeting. I'm just wondering why there's only been one meeting, and will there be a report coming forward to council around this committee?
Do you know if the fire chief is on the call this evening, or?
Through you, Chair. Our
There
fire
he is.
chief is on, but I know that the CAO has been also comprised of the meeting.
Okay. Mr. CAO, would you like to?
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, why don't I take a stab at it? I'll start, and then definitely Chief Hudson can chime in. So just a little bit of background, Councillor. We meet 4 times a year. Unfortunately, some of those meetings last year were delayed as a result of some delays with the consultant that was hired to do the fire master plan. I know at our most recent meeting, we struck a subcommittee to really look at governance moving forward. We're looking at more frequent meetings. We want to look at setting up an agenda that I think specifically looks at agenda items, education, training. There will be some reports back following that committee meeting. When you have meetings 4 times a year, you've got to wait till the subsequent meeting then to get the approval of the minutes, but we are going to look at changing the terms of reference to, I think, address some of those issues so that we are in front of council much more frequently.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. I look forward to the report coming. Thank you, Chair Brunet.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands, so there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva that all items listed on the heading of consent agenda for Monday, June 24th, 2024 be adopted as recommended. Joint Fire Services Advisory Committee minutes of September the 21st, 2023. And I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. Councillor Russell, may I have your vote, please?
Affirmative?
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I'm rebooting.
That's okay, thank you. And that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. We have now reached the Community Services and Infrastructure Committee agenda. And 7.1 delegations. We have one delegation this evening from the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, CAMA. Beverly Hendry, past president of CAMA, is in attendance to present the Town of Lincoln with the Environmental Leadership and Sustainability Award for the Water Loss Reduction Program. And then once Beverly provides introductory comments, I think our CAO will make some remarks. So, Ms. Hendry?
Hello. So good evening, Chair Brunet, Mayor Easton, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to represent the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators this evening to present the Town of Lincoln with the Environmental Leadership and Sustainability Award for municipalities with a population between 20,000 and 100,000. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bev Hendry. I'm CAMA past president, and I'd like to thank your CAO, Mike Kirkopoulos, for his support of the organization and his contribution to some awards nominations. He's been very successful. Each year, CAMA honors excellence in municipal administration through the annual awards program, recognizing achievement in 4 areas: innovation, environmental leadership and sustainability, inspiring workplace, and collaboration with external organizations and municipalities. These awards celebrate local governments and their chief administrative officers for creative and successful programs, projects, and services. The awards program promotes professional excellence in municipal administration, sharing success stories that inspire new ideas for among the CAMA membership and all other local governments, and is really a great way to mentor and share knowledge across the country. Given Canada's diverse communities, awards for innovation, environmental leadership and sustainability, and inspiring workplace are categorized by population. So there are 3 categories. One is for under 20,000, one is for 20,000 to 100,000, and the third is over 100,000. And this year we received 45 high-quality nominations. And the evaluation criteria that is used is the innovation and creativity, the impact on municipal administration, transferability to other local governments, impact on the municipality and the organization, and sustainability and long-term positive impact. The Environmental Leadership and Sustainability Award recognizes the dedication to environmental and sustainability excellence in projects that meet the needs of the present without compromising the future. This may include standout projects for initiatives or apply to the improvement of corporate processes that demonstrate real benefits to the environment. Sustainability may be both environmental considerations and wider sustainability impacts on people, resources, and the communities. So I am really, really pleased to be here to present the Town of Lincoln with the Environmental Leadership and Sustainability Award for a population between 20,000 and 100,000 for the Water Loss Reduction Program. And now if you could cue the video, that'd be great.
Congratulations to the Town of Lincoln, Ontario. Winner of the 2024 CAMA Environment and Sustainability Award in the 20,001 to 100,000 population category for its water loss reduction program. The town's comprehensive program addresses challenges related to increasing water loss, aging pipes, and the need to replace existing water meter infrastructure. Aligned with the town's commitment to environmental stewardship and sustainability, the program exemplifies dedication to preserving water resources and promoting resilient infrastructure to benefit the community and environment. The program is comprised of 2 initiatives. 1. Real-time monitoring for leaks, pressure, and temperatures public. And 2. Water meter replacement with advanced metering infrastructure AMI private. Real-time monitoring uses Hydrant.ai to identify leaks proactively, enhancing system operation. The meter replacement and AMI offers real-time meter reads, improving customer service. Despite COVID-19 lockdowns, the town successfully reduced water loss from 15% to under 9%, optimizing efficiency and reducing leak abatement program requests. As part of this program, the town worked closely with Digital Water Solutions Incorporated, Diameter Services, and Neptune Technology Group Canada Limited. Engaging associations like the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Ontario Greenbelt, and Ontario Waterworks Association, the town encourages other municipalities to adopt similar sustainable practices, sharing knowledge for positive change. Congratulations to the town of Lincoln, Ontario, winner of the 2024 CAMA Environment and Sustainability Award.
So I'm really, really pleased to be here to present this to you, Mike.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you, Beverly. And I know that before we go to a photo op, and I know there's a lot of hard work that's taken place behind the scenes in Public Works. These things don't happen by accident, but Mr. CAO, the mic is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Bev for being here. She's always been a great partner. For those of you that don't remember, Bev was the CAO for the Township of West Lincoln and always been a partner and someone I could go to and get advice from and ask a whole bunch of questions. Not to mention the president or past president of CAMA, which is the association that all CAOs and city managers belong to. So her role there, I know how her colleagues across the country speak of her and her contribution, so I want to thank her for being here. Despite this being kind of a CAO, City Managers Award, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Jillian Harris, who's not here tonight. She really was the one that shepherded this, of course, with the leadership of Dave Graham, our Director of Public Works. So the water loss reduction program, I think it speaks for itself. The video is a great video, and it's had a substantial impact, I would say, here in Lincoln for a whole bunch of reasons, but it is a role and a model for other municipalities. I know a number reached out following this, large municipalities and not so large municipalities, but when you have large places like Vaughan, Mississauga, they're saying this is a great program, would love to learn more about it. I think it's a testament to council's support of all things water loss and water loss reduction. And so, I want to thank the mayor, Chair, yourself over the years, and all of council for your support in this program. So thank you.
Okay, Madam Mayor. Are you going to go up, Madam Mayor, and Mr. CAO, and maybe Mr. Graham? That's okay. We don't have no further delegations, so I'd like to move forward. We have a motion moved by Councillor Murray that committee receive and file as information the following delegation regarding the Town of Lincoln being a recipient of the Environmental Leadership and Sustainability Award, Beverly Hendry, Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators. And I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'll close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
We have no reports this evening for the Community Services and Community and Infrastructure Committee, and we have now concluded the CSI Committee agenda. And I will now ask the Deputy Clerk to transition to our next committee agenda.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. I have now moved the gavel over to Councillor and Chair Timmers to assume the chair at this time for the General Business and Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Clerk. As Chair, we will begin the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We have no registered delegations for the General Business and Finance Committee this evening. Under reports, we will now consider report FN-09-24 regarding the 2023 year-end and audited financial statement reports. We have Matthew Chardelli, Audit Senior Manager from KPMG, in attendance to provide a presentation. But we will first hear opening remarks from our CAO. Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Through you, Madam Chair, to members of council. This is one of my favorite meetings of the year, anytime we have our auditors here. I want to thank Matt, who's worked tirelessly with our staff, as well as Carlos. Some of you will recall both these gentlemen were in front of us last year around the same time having these types of conversations. And Carlos has taken over from Lois, who used to be before us for a number of years. And is equally as interesting and has stories like Lois did when we're talking to him. So I do want to thank both for being here this evening. Council recall, I often make opening comments when they're here, and I have the opportunity to have pre-meetings with these two gentlemen and our team. And I'll give kudos to Charlotte and Kate and the rest of your teams for the thousands of journal entries and conversations and paperwork that is passed between all of you to make sure that our audit and the information presented is accurate, up to date, and in front of you. But like I said, usually I meet with these gentlemen, and the first thing I ask them, is there anything I should be worried about? And this is a direct quote. I actually didn't have any paper, so I wrote it on a napkin, and I am bringing it here. And they said to me, having reviewed journal entries that are of high-risk nature and otherwise, there is nothing weird, suspicious, or unusual. And so I wrote those three words down, and I said I would say them at this particular committee meeting before I introduce them. And from my perspective, that's a good thing, when there isn't anything unusual, when there isn't anything suspect, and when there isn't anything weird. We definitely talked about a lot of change in the legislation as well. You're going to see audited financial statements that I would suggest look different than maybe things you've seen in the past. And two things I'm going to highlight, and then these gentlemen will take you into the presentation and go into more detail. One is asset retirement obligation, and they're going to explain exactly what that means, but you'll notice something different. They warned us last year, and I think the year before, that this was coming. So how we talk about some of our assets, how we talk about some of our liabilities has changed, and so you're going to hear a little bit about that, as well as our investment reporting. So those are the two things that are going to look different on this audited financial statement than maybe you've seen in the past, but I don't want to take away from them. They've also reminded me there's a hockey game this evening, so the CAO will stop talking and turn it over to these two gentlemen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. Just prior to you starting, and sorry, Carlos, I didn't mention you. You weren't in my script, but welcome. Nice to see you. Just prior to the beginning of the presentation from KPMG, I'll ask the committee with a majority vote to request the extension of time until the presentation is complete.
Thank you, and I'll take a show of hands. Thank you, and that carries. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, please go ahead.
Well, good evening, Chair, Madam Mayor, and members of council. It is always our pleasure to present the audit findings of our hard work over the fiscal 2023 year end. It is customary for us to walk through the audit findings report, and both Matt and I will highlight those items that we consider to be most material and most significant that we would like to bring forward to your attention. Where we would like to begin this evening is a few pages in on page number 4, just by way of overall audit highlights. And before I get into any of the detail, when I reflect on the 2023 audit, I would like to mention that from an auditing standpoint, in terms of how we conducted the audit, there were very few changes in the underlying auditing standards. So the approach that we took in 2023 was largely consistent with the approach that we would have done in the prior year. The excitement happens on the accounting side. So from an accounting standpoint, there were 2 changes in the underlying accounting standards, which we will profile with you in this report. In terms of the execution of the audit, I would say there were no surprises in terms of both the procedures that we performed as well as the results of those procedures. From an accounting policy perspective, this is how the debits and the credits come together that form the foundation of your financial statements. Other than the 2 new accounting standards, all of the other items were largely consistent on a year-over-year basis. What would be an audit without discussing misstatements? We as auditors are here to scrub your numbers. I can report to council that there were no misstatements of any sort, whether corrected or uncorrected. The reason why we as a firm would also discuss corrected misstatements is because if we came to you with 6, 12, 20 adjustments, that would raise certain questions. Not only, that they were recorded, which would be great, but did management have enough time and enough resources? So the fact that we are coming to you this evening with no uncorrected or corrected misstatements means that the package that was provided to us was both complete and accurate. In terms of control deficiencies, I can confirm with council that we do categorize deficiencies in 2 buckets. Bucket number 1 would be those that we consider to be significant, and then other observations. I can confirm that there were no significant control deficiencies as part of our audit process, and as well from a other observation standpoint, there are no matters to bring forward to your attention. I will hold off on speaking on the 2 new accounting standards until we move just a further few slides in the report. So at this point in the audit process, in terms of status, the items that you see listed in bullet points, the majority of these are very customary to where we are in the audit process. I do like to highlight that there is one very important letter that we will ask your management team to sign. It is called a management representation letter. That letter is important because your financial statements are not KPMG financial statements. They belong to the town. That letter does a good job in terms of outlining what are management's responsibilities as it pertains to the generation of that financial statement. Moving further along, this slide and the next slide cover the topic of fraud. Fraud happens in organizations of different sizes, in different industries, both in the for-profit and the profit sector. We as auditors respond to the risk of fraud, and they come through in 2 areas. The risk of fraudulent revenue recognition and the risk that your management team will circumvent and go around controls to commit fraud. We respond to these 2 risks in our audit file. I can report to all of you as members of council that all of the transactions were above board. We did not encounter anything weird, awkward, or suspicious. So in terms of the risk of fraud, there are no reportable findings. And I'll let Matt walk through the next few slides.
Yes, thanks very much, Carlos. On this slide here, we will carry over part of that discussion surrounding fraud. Unlike the risk of management override of controls, which is present in every organization, large, small, for-profit, not-for-profit, public sector, the presumed risks of fraud around revenue recognition are unique to each organization that we audit under our professional standards. In the case of a municipality such as the Town of Lincoln, we as auditors do have some comfort that the primary revenue streams are relatively straightforward from an accounting perspective, and that we are, more importantly, able to easily get the audit evidence that we need to put the check mark and report on the numbers you see in the financial statements. So some of the verbiage here will mention that we as auditors have rebutted a presumed fraud risk with respect to revenue recognition for those reasons. That does not mean that we do not spend a significant amount of time auditing revenue as part of the town's audit. Certainly, we do, regardless of that rebuttal, take a deep dive into testing all material streams of revenue. That often means going to agreements from other organizations providing dollars, substantively testing self-generated revenue such as tax levies or user charges, and looking at bank deposits for other individually material sources of revenue. So as you can see on the bottom of the slide, nothing came to our attention with respect to reportable findings, which is a positive result in this area of testing. Moving forward, tangible capital assets is certainly an area for any municipality that will always be a material element of the financial statements. That term represents infrastructure, buildings, roads, and other assets under the ownership of the town, which for accounting purposes have a long-lived useful life and are capitalized on the statement of financial position and amortized over that useful life, again, for accounting purposes. Because this is such a material element of the financial statements, in any given year, this audit year included, we do work with management to ensure that the ledger of capital assets is complete from year to year. There are no gaps in the year-over-year change, and that any assets which are new on that ledger as capital items meet the accounting criteria under the public sector accounting standards to be capitalized and considered long-lived assets for accounting purposes. So I will spend much more time talking about a related item to tangible capital assets in one moment here, but the standard regular year-to-year activity that we were able to audit was above board. We did not see any issues with assets capitalized that we as auditors felt should not have been. And similarly, we did not identify any items as part of our testing where we felt management should have capitalized something that they did not. Moving to slide 9. So this is where we will spend a little bit of time. Carlos and the CAO mentioned earlier in the presentation that asset retirement obligations are one of the significant changes in the world of accounting this previous year. Public Sector Accounting Standard 3280, asset retirement obligations, was required to be adopted by the town for the fiscal year ended December 31, 2023. This is a very significant accounting standard change within the public sector, one of the largest in the last decade. And for that reason, the CAO did highlight that we've been discussing that with management and with yourselves over the past several years. Everybody did know that this was coming and that it would take quite a bit of effort from the town, not just from the management team with respect to financial reporting, but also from others who are involved in asset management. Quite simply, this accounting standard change requires all public sector reporting entities to consider future remediation costs with respect to assets under control right now. The most common examples of a future remediation cost for an asset that the town may hold now is asbestos. If you can think of buildings that were built within a certain date range, the 60s, 70s, and to a lesser extent the 80s, buildings often have significant amounts of asbestos as it was customary to be used at the time. We all now know that there is a cost associated with removing materials such as asbestos when those buildings are eventually retired from use. Another common example is the removal of a fuel tank, which may require digging into the ground or remediating the area around it. Those are two of the most common examples and two that were applicable to the town of Lincoln. What this standard required is that the town go through its entire ledger of tangible capital assets, ensure that a complete and deep dive was taken in order to identify any such assets which would carry this type of liability upon retirement in the future. In the past, that's certainly something that the town would have known, but the financial statements and the accounting standards did not require those to be estimated and booked onto the statement of financial position as a liability in today's dollars. That is the crux of the standard change. So certainly a deep dive required by the town in order to, one, identify where these potential liabilities may lie, and two, to estimate the costs in today's dollars of those future costs, which in some cases may be 20 years out, for example. So certainly us as auditors worked closely with management and, one, understood the entire process that was taken. We performed procedures to ensure that the list considered when developing this important accounting estimate was complete, and that proper care and those with relevant and adequate experience were involved in the process. And then from there, once the listing of assets where these are felt to be present was presented to us for audit, we worked with management to review the key assumptions, such as the cost per square foot of removing hazardous materials, that were ultimately aggregated on an asset-by-asset basis in order to come up with one number that shows up in the financial statements in response to the accounting standard change. So certainly a very significant amount of time for management in order to adopt this required standard change, and something that every municipality reporting under the public sector in Canada would have had to have done. From our perspective and the readers of the financial statements perspective, you will see that this accounting standard change was required to be adopted retrospectively. What this means is that the comparatives in the financial statements have been restated to show the prior period as if the standard change was required in 2022 as well. That is the most common method of adoption, although there are alternatives. So for that reason, there is quite a bit of disclosure in the financial statements of the town this year. Not to say that anything was not adopted as required or that there were any issues, but simply to draw to the reader's attention that a significant change was made as a result of this required adoption. And we will call up some of that a little bit later just to draw attention to which notes in the statements have changed to profile this. Moving on, Carlos alluded to this already at the top of the presentation. There are no corrected or uncorrected audit misstatements which we're required to bring to everyone's attention today. You can see on the page here that our audit misstatement posting threshold was $70,000. And what that means is any potential audit difference that we identified, corrected or uncorrected, which exceeded that number, is required to be reported in our presentation here today. That is not to say that below that threshold we do not look. We sample items of dollar value both far above and far below that number. But if we had any findings, that is the number with which they would have to exceed in order to be included in our report today. Similarly, I won't retread ground over control deficiencies. Carlos did a good job explaining that there are different levels of control deficiencies or observations that an auditor may identify. We had none of any of those levels and therefore have nothing to bring to your attention with respect to control deficiencies today. I will pass it back to Carlos for just a couple of other points, other reporting matters. The first box at the top goes through one change, the asset retirement obligation that we've profiled in detail, but there was one other accounting standard change that was required to be adopted. Certainly not as significant as the ARO, but I will let Carlos profile that as well.
So the second area of excitement is with financial instruments. So these are the rules that govern how you measure your financial statements on your statement of financial position. In the past, many of the investments that you were holding, whether it was a GIC, a bond, a debenture, you would include them on your balance sheet at what's called amortized cost. Just think cost. Under the new financial instrument standard, there are now differences depending on the nature of the investments. So for the town specifically, there's a portion of their investment portfolio that is invested in instruments that we would call derivatives. And under the new financial statement standard, it is very prescriptive in that these specific types of derivatives are required to be measured and reflected on your statement of financial position at fair value. So in prior years, it was at cost. Now it's at fair value. So in this case for the town, that difference between the cost and the market value was approximately $282,000. So that is a change going from the old standard to the new standard. Now, Matt already touched on, the column, the fact that under certain columns in your financial statements, you'll see the word restated. I do want to remind council that generally you have restatements for one of two reasons. Number one, there's an error. Or number two, there's a change in accounting policy. What we are going through with you this evening are changes in accounting policy. They are not errors. So I just want to make that clear for council. From an accounting standpoint, there was a change with respect to the structure and the setup of the library. So for 2023, you pick up your percentage interest in the library operations, and that would have been different as compared to the prior year. Certainly, we looked at what management performed as part of this exercise, and we're happy with the journal entries and the amounts that they picked up from the library. Employee future benefits. This is an area where organizations seek outside help from actuaries to help determine that liability. There is some complex mathematics and modeling that goes into determining what those liabilities are that will be incurred in future years. We as auditors, we don't simply blindly look at what an actuary provides. We do look at the assumptions that they use, and we assess whether or not we concur and whether or not we deem them to be reasonable. And so for 2023, based on our work, we're satisfied that the amounts are reasonably correct, and we're also satisfied that the disclosures in your financial statements are both complete and accurate. Independence. If one were to read the auditor's report, the first word is independent. It is very important for auditors to maintain independence. I can confirm with council that we remained independent throughout the entire audit process. I do often get questions on, give me an example of what that means. So what that means is we are not bookkeepers. We are here to audit your books. So if we are involved in performing bookkeeping entries, that would be one area that we would venture into a gray area because we can't be in a position where we are auditing our own work. So we've maintained independence throughout the process. Moving along, there are a few appendices that are included in the package. Again, we will provide management with the management representation letter for signing. We do have some comments on ESG. We do field a lot of topics on ESG. Happy to share our insights on what we believe ESG means for organizations, specifically municipalities. We are undertaking what we call materiality assessments. That simply means, the ESG is a very big universe. We're helping organizations just highlight the 5 areas that would be most critical under ESG. There is one thing that you do not see in our report. In prior years, we have profiled cybersecurity. That's a very important topic. The fact that you don't see it profiled in this report does not suggest that it's not important. Just want to make that very clear. I'm sure we all are aware of cyber risks and cyber threats, that are happening throughout southwestern Ontario, as well as the province and in Canada. Again, happy to share our insights with you, at a later stage. My only comment today is continue to evolve how you defend against those that wish to attack your systems, and don't stay still. Certainly an important topic. Also, the topic of fraud prevention is always an area of concern. We do see as a firm that when the economy slows, generally, the number of fraud incidences increase. It's just something that we see, and it happens all around us. So, and the final topic, artificial intelligence. Again, happy to share our insights at a later point in time, but certainly some of the questions that we're getting from councils, boards, and audit committees is, don't just tell me how to manage our risk. Can you share some opportunities in terms of how AI can improve your processes, make them more efficient, and how best to guide our employees in terms of what they can or cannot do with respect to AI? So those topics are outside of a financial statement audit, but we do find them to be important and exciting. It has been some time since we conducted the field work. We are not aware of any subsequent events that have occurred. From council's perspective, if they expect to see subsequent events that are not disclosed, or if they have matters to report under the topic of fraud, certainly the time for council to tell their auditors would be today or tomorrow as we finalize the audit process. In terms of the financial statements themselves, I'm almost at the end of our messaging here. The audit report is a clean audit report. That means it's unqualified. We did have some wording changes around the financial instruments that we provided to management towards the end of last week. We added, I think, 2 sentences in one of the notes just to clarify the adoption of the new standard. Otherwise, we're satisfied that the statements are accurate, complete, and have all the bells and whistles that you should have and that you expect to see in a set of financial statements. So that is what I would call audit findings in a nutshell. And with that, I will pause and back to the chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to open it up to committee for any questions. First up, we have Councillor Brunei.
Thank you, Chair Timmers. So appreciate the report as usual. Sounds like there's no alarm bells going off and nothing weird happening, so that's good. I'm just wondering if there's anything, when I look at our reserves, and you had that tabled in there, but is there anything in there that discussions with staff, in talks that has any concerns from your perspective when we look at the growth that's going on, and yet we look at our reserves, and where they are currently? Was there anything in there that tweaked anything from your perspective at KPMG when you look at other municipalities and you're looking at our books?
Through you, the chair, to the councillor. When it gets on the topic of reserves, we as auditors first look at what reserves are in place. Have they been authorized? Can we tie them back to approved minutes? I think the gist of the question that you're asking is, are they sufficient and are they appropriate relative to the size of the town? And from what we see in terms of benchmarking, no 2 municipalities are alike. And it does depend a little bit on the tone at the top and the level of reserves that a town would like to hold for future generations. So the percentages are all different. Some organizations, they do set like a percentage of tangible capital assets as an example. I've seen some use 4%, and they say, 4% of our tangible capital assets we should set aside because we know that in 20, 30, 40 years, at some point, we're going to have to replace that. So it is very specific to each municipality, but from our standpoint, we do ensure that we tie any changes from year to year down to minutes to make sure they're authorized.
Through you, Chair, thank you for that response, Carlos, and I appreciate that. I'm glad at the very end of your presentation, you talked about cybersecurity because it was something that I wanted to bring up. So I'm glad that you made that, discussion about tying in cyber attacks and, ransomware and everything that's going on in the world, as well as AI. I just, as an aside, I just came back from a 3-day conference for another board that I sit on, and I sat through 2 different sessions, 3 hours each, so 6 hours, listening to lawyers talk about, everything that's, impacting organizations, whether it's hospitals, sewage water treatment plants, or municipalities, and the ransomwares that are being paid, and it was scary. It was scary to see what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years on when an organization would get a ransom threat, and now the monies that's being paid out, like huge risk. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I think it's important, and as council, we're certainly communicating with staff, and we're getting feedback from staff about training, and so it's on the front of our mind, and our residents should know that. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And AI, again, I know a little bit about AI, but listening to these speakers who are actually dealing with this every day, I mean, there is some really, really powerful information out there, and it's just how do you use it? And so I'm glad you brought that up. So thanks very much for the report, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, we have Councillor Mikulik. I can't really see you over there. Okay. It's not-
Oh,
Okay,
there we go.
There you go.
Thank you
It's
very
a
much.
little delayed.
Through you to KPMG reps. Thank you for coming as well. Just curious, something I noticed in your presentation is fraud arising from management override of controls. You touched on it, you explained it. We didn't have this last year. What has changed that you would discover this year? This was not an issue that I observed in the report last year, and now this year it is. So what has changed?
Through you, the chair, to the councillor, we are not reporting that a fraud occurred. We are reporting that within all audits in Canada, irrespective of type of organization, we're always required to respond to the risk of fraud, either through management override or management fraudulently misrepresenting the revenue recognition. So we would have reported in prior years that those 2 risks always exist and that we are required to respond to them. So we are reporting that we did not detect anything on the topic of fraud, so no fraud has occurred based on the results of our procedures. And last year in 2022, we would have also reported that based on our response to those 2 risks, that there was no fraud that had occurred either in 2022.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just looking at slide 4 of your presentation, and it said matters to report is highlighted in pink. And on page 4, that's highlighted in pink. So I wasn't sure if that was an issue. Last year's report, you didn't have that presented in this way. So I appreciate that clarification. Another question I have through you is on unqualified versus qualified, what's the difference between those two audits? When would we, if we, or any municipality, want a qualified audit?
Through you, the chair, to the councillor, generally, no one would want a qualified financial
Okay,
statement.
I don't know.
That would mean that there is a reservation of some sort, some audit difficulty, that we could not satisfy ourselves with our procedures, that caused us an inability to conclude on a matter. So a clean report is unqualified. A qualified would mean that there's some sort of issue or obstacle. Now, with the asset retirement obligation standard change, some municipalities are having difficulty in getting through that accounting standard. It could be because they have a lack of resources, they have new staff, their records are not in good shape, and sometimes when you have those that exist, auditors just can't complete their work. And so in those cases, what we expect to see in the next few months is some qualified reports that state that the auditors had an inability to audit the completeness of the asset retirement obligation. So you do see qualifications from time to time. Generally, it's not a good thing, but for the town, you are not in that scenario.
Okay, I was just curious. That was just a question out of curiosity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Next, we have Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair Timmers.
It's a hard time getting a signal over to the west side here. East side, sorry. Back and forth. Thank you, Chair Timmers. Through you to the presenters, thank you, Carlos and Matthew, for coming. Appreciate the way you walk us through the fun world of accounting and bring out some of the highlights to it. I really appreciate it. And a question to you, I'm not sure whether you or to staff, because it's out of the staff report. Just a question, page 7 of 9 on the staff report about procurement. Just curious, how do we get connected with the different organizations that are on here? How do we get there? How do we communicate? I'm in favor of it. I would certainly encourage that we do more of it. But I'm just curious, how do we get to the names on there? And it's quite a varied listing. Like, it's not just a couple of things. So through you, Chair Timmers, to staff or to.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Reimer. I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte, Dr. Charlotte.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, I think it's a combination. Sometimes it is the departments themselves that are, that may have conversations about shared services, but also our procurement specialist, our procurement staff member would be in contact with the different organizations, with the NPPC or various other contacts they have in procurement that could lead us towards that.
Follow up to that, if I may, Chair
go
Timmers. So is there, Charlotte, is there like a, I don't know how to say, like a newsletter that goes out that, hey, this is what we're buying this month, anybody want to jump in? Or is there, like, I think it's a great idea. I can see, the only reason I picked it out was because we're connected with the Lake of Bays and Town of Huntsville for fire rescue vehicles. Like, I get next door, but, which is great. So I just didn't know, is there a way to increase that? Or is that, have we kind of reached our maximum amount on that kind of thing? Or, I know it'll probably vary from year to year, I'm aware of that, but through you, Chair Timmers.
Charlotte?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to the councillor. I might have to ask a little bit more and get back to you on that, but I do know, for example, the Niagara Public Purchasing Committee, they have regular meetings. So they would be reviewing those items and having those discussions at their meetings. I know sometimes there are things that come through our emails through LAS as well. But beyond that, I would have to do a little bit more digging and find out if there's more potential there, and I can certainly have that conversation with staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor, good?
Thanks, Chair Timmers.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Reimer. I think our CAO would like to add some comments.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to the councillor, to answer your question, is there more opportunities? Yes, there is. I know as a CAO group, we're looking at it, and I recently had a meeting last Friday, and I know Director Graham provided me a little bit of an update on additional things that may not be in your report that we're doing, everything from line painting to crack sealing to catch basin cleaning and our CCTV and sewer flushing work. So there is probably hundreds of things we can do together and procure together, and we're starting to have a lot more of these conversations. I know here within West Niagara, Director Graham's definitely playing a lead role on the public works side.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. So I have Councillor Russell with his hand up online. I was going to, is this directly to the presentation, Councillor? Because we are going to talk about the staff report after, if you want to wait. Okay. Okay, very good. So does anyone have any questions further to the presentation? Okay, seeing none. So thank you both very much for being here this evening. I'm very happy there was nothing weird or suspicious. Oh, something happened over there. Weird or suspicious or unusual. So it's a very positive report, and thank you very much for being here. So we are now going to move to the staff report. If anyone has any questions directly related to the staff report, and Councillor Russell, I'm going to call on you first, as you had your hand up previously. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to probably Director Tunakaitis. On page 3 of 9 of the staff report, when we're looking at the reserve funds. So again, it reviews in there that again, there's going to be quite a large amount due out from our current reserve fund, which is going to drop that balance down to a few million. I'm wondering what the plans are to get that reserve balance back up, and can it be done without a levy increase?
Charlotte, I'm turning it over to you. Please
Sure.
go ahead.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. I mean, I think the plan is what we're trying to work on through our budget process. So there are a few things we've been doing. We've obviously been working on our asset management plan. And the next stage of the asset management plan that's due in July of 2025 is really to have more of a comprehensive financial plan that ties all that information together to say, you know, if these are the levels of service that we want to achieve, what's the cost of doing that? What's the investment that's required over the next several years? And then we would compare that to what we're currently doing. So I think what our response is and what our planning is to look at it through the budget and through the asset management plan. In terms of whether it requires a levy increase, it depends on the nature of the infrastructure. It depends if it's something that's development related, in which case it would be through the Development Charges Reserve Fund. If it's water or wastewater related, it would be those respective reserve funds. And then beyond that, then it does become the discussion about levels of service. If we put more in than we're taking out, that obviously causes them to build up. If we're spending more than we're putting in, it does the reverse. So those are the things we talk about through the budget process and try to achieve. So really, ultimately, it's council's decision. But there is an infrastructure gap. We have been talking about it. I do think we will need to be investing more into our reserves in the coming time.
Okay, thank you. And second question, Madam Chair?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Probably back to Director Tunakaitis. Under the CIP section, page 5 of 9, under, again, this is prior to you, but under Director Wagner, we received some numbers where it was approximately $500,000 per year repayment on the CIPs over a 9 or 10 year period. We're up to 1.2 million for last year, but with only a budget of 155. Are we playing catch up, or what's the reasoning for the difference between the prior numbers we received and this number?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, I think that number, I wasn't here, so it's hard for me to answer for Director Wagner. I think it's in some ways, where we're expecting it to smooth out to over time. But there are anomalies based on timing, based on when those developments are occurring and when the work that they're required to complete under their development agreements is completed. So I think what we've got is likely some higher costs on the front end, and then it should start to even out over time. But we will look at that again and try to look at a forecast for that.
Okay. And last question, and you may have answered it there. When we were able to bring our amount to cover the cost up by an operations surplus. In future years, when there isn't a surplus available, we'll be able to cover that cost if the cost is the same. I'm assuming if the cost drops because there's not a requirement, then we can probably cover it off by the dividend and maybe some infrastructure DCs. But I think you answered it.
Through you, Chair, to the Councillor, yes, I think that your thinking is the same as my thinking. I'm hoping that over time, when we smooth out some of these higher amounts on the front end of it, that we'll get to a more equalized basis that combined with what we have in the budget plus the dividends would be enough to cover it off. But we'll have to keep looking at it, and it's possible that we'll have to make some adjustments to the operating budget as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Next speaker is Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to Director Tunakaitis. As a person who works in a similar field, I can recognize the value of a boring audit report. So congratulations to you and your team. Unexceptional is delightful, and I really appreciate that there were no surprises. I wanted to just kind of piggyback on Councillor Reimer's question about the procurement, because although it is, again, a very small piece, I'm just wondering, and perhaps not you or perhaps CAO Kirkopoulos might want to, is this something that we have policies around, in that are we actively looking for opportunities to share procurement, like the shared services model? We're exploring a lot of different types of them. And I guess what I'm wondering, is this just an ad hoc, when we can make it happen thing, or is it that we have a policy within our purchasing department to actively look for these whenever possible and move forward in that way?
Mr. CAO, did you want to take that, or Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think both Charlotte and I
Okay, go ahead.
can absolutely can chime in. I've got our procurement policy and the procurement policy bylaw in front of us. It doesn't really in there, unless Charlotte corrects me, specifically speak to where we can, we're going to seek shared services opportunities. Definitely something I think if we're looking to update the policy, we can incorporate in there. I would say rather it's a practice that we are going through and that each department is looking at. Where we can, we will look at broader public sector procurement provisions. There's piggyback clauses oftentimes where we can piggyback on someone else's procurement if they get a product or buy a service that is cheaper or that we're also in the market for going out to. But there's definitely some things we can look at, and so we can take that as direction leaving here. If we want to do something to update our policy, we definitely can. Like I said, there's guidelines and provisions around public sector procurement that we're following and that we're using, and each of the departments are having conversations. I know the region is looking at coordinating that a lot more than it's currently coordinated. But I would say, from that question, or if there is direction this evening, we can take that to as specific direction to bring back a policy that incorporates that.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor and Chair and Mr. CEO. Director Tunakaitis, did you have anything you wanted to add on that as well, or no?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think that was a good summary. I'm not aware of it being in the procurement policy itself, but we are looking at updating it so we can look at that. But I think it's, it really is the nature of staff. We're always looking for things in the most efficient, most cost-effective way that we can. I know that that's been my observation across the organization. So I think those things are born out of just our desire to look for the most efficient way to do things, and we'll continue to do that, but we'll look at the policy as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Next speaker is Councillor Brunei.
Thank you, Chair Timmers, through you to Director Charlotte. I wanted to just briefly ask a few questions with regards to Appendix C. So Appendix C speaks about our investment balances and the transaction review for year end of December 31st, 2023. And it speaks about the investment policy. It talks about adherence to statutory requirements. It talks about preservation of capital, diversification of investment portfolio, maintaining liquidity, and earning a competitive rate of return. So, I don't know, how many people saw our current environment in terms of finance globally, how this was coming, and I don't know where we are in terms of any type of recession. But when I look at these charts, I think there should be some level of concern. I'm just wondering, Director, if you could comment about our investments and how you see this moving forward in terms of interest earned.
Go ahead, Director.
Through you, Chair, to the Councillor. Most of our investments are locked in on a longer-term horizon, so the rates of return that were embedded in those investments at the time they were taken out are not really something I can change at this point in time. I mean, as you said, we didn't know, right? So we invest over time, and at that point in time, I don't think most of us foresaw the repeated hikes in the interest rate that were going to happen that, really happened over about a 1-year time period. So in terms of the outlook, I think we're just going to stick to the strategy that, I did do a report to Council in the fall, and we're continuing that strategy to hold those investments until maturity as much as possible. And, if the opportunity arises, for example, if our development charges pick up, we start to look at our forecast and we foresee that we're going to have a higher balance that's available to invest, then we would look at doing something to take advantage of the higher rates that are available right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brunei, do you have another question, or?
No, I'm good at that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. On screen, we have Councillor Pachariva, who's next. Let's go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Chair Timmers, and a question to Director Tunikaitis. So on page 4, about the parkland dedication. So we need to spend 60% of the funds that's in the reserve, and that goes against projects going forward. So how is that fund reestablished? Because I was under the impression that the parkland dedication amount paid by developers was also reduced. So how are we going to get the funds back into that?
Director?
Through you, Chair, to the Councillor. So there were changes to legislation, over the last few years that impacted our development charges collected and our parkland dedication cash in lieu. The 60% requirement is actually a requirement on both of those reserve funds. So it's something that was introduced to say that essentially the municipality needs to do a report each year to say, yes, we've committed to, or we've got in our forecast enough projects to add up to 60% of those balances. So what we did in our reports is we just did it enough to get to the 60%, because in reality, it is more than that, because we're expecting to collect those amounts in the future. It's kind of an interesting concept, which is the development charge study in itself is the list of projects that we intend to do to spend those development charges on. So the requirement to report on 60% is interesting, because really it's all spoken for. So for the parkland dedication, we've got some projects in the forecast that are slated right now, but it's still subject to council approval. So what's happened to date is, you know, we've looked at the forecast, we've allocated the funds in that reserve fund for things that we think would be eligible projects, that we think council would support. But when the budget comes forward, you can always still make changes to that or make other suggestions.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Chair Timmers. Yeah, through you, I mean, because I don't want to go back to the days of, Prokich Park where we had to wait 10, 15 years in order to have the money set aside to be order to develop it, right? So it would be going backwards. So as long as we keep on top of this, I think we'll be okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patriva. Next.
Thank you very much, Chair Timmers, through you to Charlotte. So just kind of dovetailing on that, like when I was looking at Appendix D, the Schedule E, the Statement of Reserve Fund Balances, and there's several departments like stormwater, drainage, fire, parks and recs. Those numbers are in parentheses. What does the parentheses mean? They're pretty significant.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, when it's in parentheses, it means that particular reserve fund is in a deficit position. And the Development Charges Act, as well as our reserve fund policy, does allow for borrowing between the different development charge reserve funds. So within DCs, from roads to water, from water to wastewater, and then the reserve funds that are borrowing from the others pay interest to them. The other thing that's important to know is that when we do the DC background study, we list all the projects that we need to raise funds for, and we also adjust it by the reserve fund balance that is the opening balance of that study. So for example, if we had money in the water reserve, we wouldn't also then include that into the calculation of the DCs. We'd collect less because of that. If we have a shortfall, we need to collect more because of that. And those kind of negative balances, they result from timing differences, basically. So we might know that we're collecting those development charges over 10 or 20 years, but we need to do the project up front earlier on. It puts the reserve fund into that deficit position, and then we collect the development charges over time to replenish it.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's just with those three departments alone, it's 4 or 5, almost 6 million right there. So that's a number that caught my attention. On that same schedule, DC credit agreements, Schedule C. Trying to understand that, like it didn't like. How do those credits work? Do they, like, when buildings get taken down or torn down, developers have up to 5 years, I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, to build something to avoid paying development charges. Do we factor that into our accounting as far as what is actually coming our way when those anticipated DC revenues are coming our way? Where would that be reflected?
Go ahead, Charlotte.
Through you, Chair. The DC credit holder transactions that are on Schedule C of the DC Reserve Fund Statement are different than the demolition credits or the credits that are for when someone is taking down a building. So those are different. Those are an actual reduction of the amount that the developer needs to pay on the premise that they've already essentially paid development charges on the existing building that's on that land. These credit holder transactions are more typically if a developer does work that we've identified in the background study, for example, and they would get credit for doing that work. So if they were paying for that work, they wouldn't also then pay for the DCs on that same area of the DC Reserve Fund.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. It's just, we hear a lot about, anticipated revenue from DCs. I just want to make sure that we have an idea of what we're going to be receiving. And then final question I have is, with finance, with business and GBF, and municipalities take on financial condition assessments or financial master plans. We've done DC reports or DC plans. wastewater and water and that sort of thing. Should we be, as a municipality, looking at creating a financial master plan, retaining an outside consulting agency, similar to what Parks and Recs does, similar to, we have transportation master plans, we have various master plans. Should we be considering something of that nature? I get a little nervous when I hear the word "I think." I'm not sure, we'll see. That makes me a little nervous as far as the long-term sustainability.
Through you to Director Tunakaitis? Or through me, I guess.
I'll do my best to answer that. I think we do have a lot of plans that have financial implications. So the biggest one is our asset management plan. In 2021 dollars, we had almost $600 million worth of capital assets just in our core infrastructure. So roads, water, sewer, just those assets alone. So I think, there is a process of maturing and developing our financial plans, and we've been taking pieces, each piece at a time, and building on to that. So I would say that the water, wastewater financial plan, the asset management plan, and then our budget process all kind of feed into that planning. I think I'm not sure anyone will ever be able to tell you with exact certainty what the future will hold. So I think there is an element, I don't want you to interpret that when I say I think this or that, it means I haven't looked into it. I'm not trying to plan for it, nor do I think it means that staff aren't or that council aren't. I think it's just that there are certain elements like interest rates, development charge collections, rates of development that are a little bit unpredictable. And so we plan as best as we can to respond to those things as they change with time. But I think we can always improve. I think there is always room for growth and improvement in terms of our forecasting and our financial planning. And I think beyond that, if there was something else council wanted to do in terms of, even your recommendation of someone external, I would turn that to the CAO to speak about that, but I do think we've been putting quite a bit of work into it in-house as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director. I see our CAO has put his mic on, so I'm going to turn it over to him for some comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and maybe just to pick up a little bit on where Charlotte was. I've heard of financial condition assessments. Not a lot of Canadian, or definitely not a lot of Ontario municipalities are doing them, but I think at the end of the day, what the councillor is talking about is some sort of assessment that looks at our financial health. I would tell you a lot of the things that Councillor Russell and Councillor Reimer have requested as part of Budget Committee, and I would also suggest our GBF Chair and Vice Chair and all of Council has requested in terms of benchmarking, in terms of how we compare to others, in terms of all the other policies, is really what you would find in a financial condition assessment. BMA is one of those organizations that, Councillor, I know you often look to, and BMA is the one that does it, and effectively what it is how do we compare with others? Again, as I said, there's only one or two municipalities that I've been able to find in the province that are doing them. Now, it wasn't an exhaustive search. It is much more of an American tool that is often used, but I can tell council that you've put in your strategic plan, and you've put in your priorities, making sure we've got excellent financial sustainability. We've had a financial sustainability plan over the years that we've looked at, or at least tenets of a financial sustainability plan. So definitely something that we can, I think, pull together and maybe come back to you and present all the things that would be in a financial condition assessment that we're already doing. This council's also had us looking at forecasting and the importance of forecasting, and I know that's something Charlotte and I have spoken about as well. We are taking on, I think, in trying to look at, definitely within Public Works and Water and Wastewater, what long-range infrastructure planning looks like. I know I've had conversations with Director Bruder as well as Director Graham on that particular piece. So there is a lot of moving parts to it. How do you manage the pressures and the timing of growth, et cetera? So, I mean, we can definitely put something together for you, Councillor. on the specific item and for all of council so that we can, I think, share some of that information. We're doing it, but maybe it's an amalgam of those things in one report.
Okay, thank you very much,
appreciate that.
Mr. CAO. Counselor, did you, you're
I
good?
I think it's important. I think that having an outside lens look at ourselves, KPMG, they can only verify our books. They can't advise us. They're not here to advise us. They're here to tell us if everything is appropriate and accurate. However, I feel as though, given what's happened in the past and what's coming up in the future, especially last year, we had to have that subcommittee looking at our debt level increase or
Right.
whatever.
So
I'm not
Counselor,
sure, when would we?
maybe that's something, if you want to bring a motion forward at some point or further
I can do
discussion.
that right now. I can-
But right now, we're
Okay.
discussing this
I'll wait
report.
till the
so-
discussion's over.
Okay. Counselor, okay, you're off. Mary Ston? You're up.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I was going to speak to the issue about the diversification of the investment portfolio, but it really is just another item that kind of falls under the same situation in terms of how much do we know, how much do we understand. I don't know how many letters and motions that I've seen come through council correspondence, but I'm going to guess that we're at least a dozen, maybe more, municipalities that are sending letters to the Premier about the financial matters that all of the municipalities in the province are faced with. AMO has certainly spoken on behalf of all of us. And in each case, there's like a recital of issues that are in every letter. It's not particularly enlightening. It's just an indication of frustration level that municipalities have, and there really aren't a lot of options open to us. I feel that this discussion that we're having is very timely, it's very important, even in terms of having a report that explains what both the CAO and our Chief of Finances said about where we're at, so that we can put that on an agenda and start having a discussion about where we think, not necessarily gaps, but where can we strengthen the information that we have. So if you look at diversification of the investment portfolio, we can have a discussion about it as an individual matter, but the rules are the rules in terms of what we can invest in and how much we can invest. So it is about having a desire for more knowledge, finding out how we can utilize it, and why wouldn't we want to do that? It's really part of our governance accountabilities. So I'll let, I won't interfere with the councillor's motion, but I certainly support the direction that we're going. And what a position to be in, to begin to look outside of where you're at, knowing that you already have a very, very good base. You're looking to fine-tune things, you're looking to add on where you can, and maybe we'll be able to write our own letter to the Premier that is very Lincoln-specific, but also is has some thoughts in it about what the future could look like, because it's not getting any easier for municipalities. So I guess my question would be around the viability of receiving such a report before the next committee of the whole.
Okay, thank you, Mary Ston. So, Charlotte, I'm looking to you or to our CAO. I see the CAO's lights on, so go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, I mean, I'll speak for our finance department. Putting together a report like this, as much as it's an amalgam of information that we're pulling together, I'm not sure we can get that done before the next committee of the whole. It is a rather lengthy process, something we can definitely have in front of you before budget, if we're doing a staff report. If we're engaging a consultant, I think we're going to have to be in front of you, with the terms of reference on the procurement side of life, determine who can do it, determine the cost, and a couple of other things. So it's probably a lengthier exercise. But I would suggest if it's something you want us to pull together and bring forward in terms of what we've already got, we can look to do that. I'm not going to put a necessarily timeline in the next one or two committee of the wholes, but we can definitely get it to you soon, rather than later.
Okay, just to clarify, Madam Chair, I wasn't talking about a consultant's report. I was just talking about essentially, Mr. CAO, what you and Charlotte said verbally, and then we can decide at whenever that appropriate time comes, on what we want more specifically, where we feel we want more information.
Okay,
But
go ahead.
we have the answer. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the Mayor. I mean, there's definitely some stuff we can pull together and bring in front of council, so there's, I think, just a lot of disparate parts that we can do that. I know, as Charlotte said, and I'll reiterate, the next stage of our asset management plan is going to have all of this information in it. So it is forthcoming. It just may not be forthcoming maybe as quick as all members of council want. And really, it's focused on capital, not all the other operating plans that are focused on it. So, in your hands.
Okay. It's not my habit to pile work on people, but so I'm satisfied to wait until the asset management plan is in our hands, and then we can continue to look at it. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with that as well. Maryston, I feel like that is coming forward, and I'm not really quite sure what everyone is thinking, what exactly they're looking for outside of that, but I'm not looking for a consultant report either as the chair, but I'm not really quite sure what Councillor Mikulik was looking for. We do have the asset management plan coming forward soon, and I think that will hit a lot of those topics and questions maybe that you had in your mind. I'm not sure on that, but that's what I'm thinking. So I don't know if anyone else has any comments around that.
I'm going to come off, so
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue at all. Oh, I see Councillor Mikulik, go ahead.
Well, I think that we have capital forecasts, we have, these forecasts in DC, where the DC funding goes, but we also have operations forecasts that I don't know how much we talk about that moving forward in the future. And that is a levy for a lot of part, funded expenditure. And that's where I'm not sure where we're going. And we're going into budget deliberations. My timing for making this proposal is that if there's a required financial ask for a report like this through a consultant, then now would probably be the time to ask for that, to put it in our budget for the upcoming year. I think a report like this would probably take 6 months to a year to draft anyway. But I think if we're talking for the next 10 years and we're just, well, we want to buy this, we want to do that, we want to be, and just to throw everything on a piece of paper and then try to find a way to fund it, I think we, it's just my opinion, but again, it's open to council's feedback or their opinion. And I've drafted a motion or a direction if should there be,
Okay.
that I'd like to put forward.
Are you planning to move that motion tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have our CAO would like to comment first.
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. I understand where the councillor is going, and I think there's some merit in parts of that. I do think it's important to wait for the asset management plan to come forward, which is going to give you a very good description of what's needed and what's not needed. So we can budget for a report like this that's this extensive and bring it forward to you as part of the budget process so that in 2025 we can do an exercise like this, because based on the scope that I'm that I'm thinking, I'm hearing from the counselor, it isn't going to be one of those things we just have operating dollars to do. So I'm looking at Charlotte nod. The other thing that I would expect, and I'm going to say is critical, we need to have some service level conversations. Mayor and I had this coming into this meeting about roads as an example, something we all love, and I don't mean to throw the road bomb out there and suggest we're cutting all the roads we're doing. But it's a service level conversation first and foremost, not just what we can afford. We all want to do everything. And I think if we go out and we talk to residents, we want to do all the parks. We want to build new centers. We want to build spaces to bring people together. All wonderful things, all things municipalities are in the business of doing. But we also need to start having, especially when things are slower, when the economy and we're looking at some of those challenges are out there, service level conversations. And so again, I won't go down the path of roads. I use that one, and I think everyone gets their back up, gets a little nervous. The CAO is suggesting cutting the amount of roads we're doing. Not necessarily, but it is a conversation we should have, because it is an important conversation that we need to be having around service levels, not just what can we afford to do. We can afford to do a lot of things if we put a plan in place, but should we be doing them? Should we have roads at the current level they're at? Maybe, but maybe not. And so I think I would suggest to you, it's a broader conversation than just a financial conversation. It is a service conversation. And you're starting to see us, I think, put less projects forward in the capital plan for you. There's a deliberate reason why. And I think some of the good things that came out of the conversation we had around debt is when is the right time to borrow, not when rates are higher, but when rates are lower. And so you are seeing us, I think, slow down a little bit now, despite what I think residents are always going to say, and that is do more things for us, plant more trees. And so, again, it's a service level conversation that also needs to be had. I'd be remiss if I said it's just a financial conversation.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. So I have,
Well, I can, you know.
Counselor, just one moment.
Okay.
Counselor Pachariva, you had your hand up and now you've put it down. You're out? Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to give him an opportunity to speak. Okay, Counselor Mikulik, you're back in the queue. Oh, very soon. I'm not sure. Are you finished speaking, Counselor?
I appreciated turn my mic on. I appreciate the CIO's comments. I'll maybe wait to put that direction forward. However, I would like to have that on our minds come budget time, that this may be something that we're going to have to do. As much as nobody likes doing it, nobody likes looking at their wallet and thinking how they're going to spend their money for the next 10 years. But I think we need to take a serious look. And if it
Okay.
requires direction from an outside consulting agency, then that's what we might have to look at.
Okay.
Those are my comments.
All right, thank you, Counselor. I see our CAO nodding.
Through you,
Mike,
Madam
did
Chair,
wanna add
so
something?
I just want to reaffirm on the record that absolutely it will be part of the and I'm looking at Charlotte, when we come in 2025 with the budget, we will put some dollars in place to address this particular issue. In the meantime, I will try to get you, and I know there's a motion already and direction already where we're supposed to be coming back to you for. So absolutely, I wanted to confirm with the councillor, it'll be coming forward. We'll plan for it in 2025.
Okay, very good, thank you. And Mary Stin, you're next.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that council understands that if we want to look at issues around operating budgets, that we're the ones that need to come forward with the motions to address service. They're not going to come from the staff, because they build the operating budget based on where we're going, the direction that we're giving. So if that is an issue, or if that becomes an issue, they're going to be our motions. They're not coming from staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary Stin. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue, so there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer that committee receive and file for information report FN-09-24 regarding the 2023 year-end and audited financial statement report and associated presentation, and approve the 2023 audited consolidated financial statements as presented in Appendix A of the report, and that the 2023 annual treasurer statements of reserve funds for development charges and parkland dedication as presented in appendices D and E be made available to the public and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing upon request. I now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'll close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Devan. We have no confidential items. Do we have any committee report remarks? Seeing none, there be no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 7:36 PM. Thank you, everyone. Good night.